And colleagues, I am particularly delighted to be able to welcome as the chair of this panel, Professor Karen Bryan. Karen is the Vice-Chancellor of York St John University. She is the chair of Yorkshire Universities, and I am particularly pleased that she's here to chair this panel because she was the lead author on that report to which I referred earlier, the multi-stakeholder report on supporting graduate employment and employability in Yorkshire. So colleagues, welcome back. Welcome Karen Bryan, please.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much. So panel 2 is going to discuss how we can work together to retain international students who come here to study. But just before we move into that panel, I'm delighted to welcome Helen Bradley, who is a career consultant from the University of Bradford. And Helen is just going to briefly introduce the Yorkshire University's newly refreshed Inclusive Recruitment Guide to help frame this discussion. Over to you.
Hi everybody, so the guides have actually arrived. I've got a copy here and there's some at the back so everybody can take a look. So an original guide was produced last year in June 2023 and it's now been reviewed, and it's been reviewed in collaboration with employers from the different 12 universities. So the new version is being updated to include some case studies and a section on recruiting international students and graduates, particularly including information about the graduate visa and the sponsorship route, because this is an area we find employers are unsure of, so hopefully this guide will make it a little bit clearer for you. The guide also includes a new section on underrepresented groups, which has already had a lot of interest from various employers, including the West Yorkshire, the combined authorities. The resource is meant as a guide and highlights practical recommendations. So, you know, we don't want to tell you what to do. We already know you have great processes in place, but, you know, there's some practical recommendations that you can perhaps take on board. Each section in the guide includes an additional resources section and links to each of the 12 partner university institutions. So within the guide, you know, there is support on positive action versus positive discrimination, so helping you to take measures to make your recruitment processes more inclusive. Information and support on reviewing your assessment methods and interview types and questions, and there's some recommendations for making reasonable adjustments and supporting your new employers once they're in the workplace, and a section on people with hidden disabilities. And as mentioned, the section on the recruitment of international students, which is newly added, and some example case studies there. So I'm introducing this because we've got a workshop this afternoon, so I'm trying to entice you all to pop in, where myself and other colleagues from Leeds, Sheffield and Bradford are going to share examples within the guide, share their own examples of how we've used the guide, and in groups you will be able to have a closer look at the guide as well, considering how it might be useful, discuss challenges in delivering inclusive recruitment practices, and share what works well for you or not, and what has been successful. On the slides that we do share this afternoon, which I presume will be shared around everybody that's attended, there's a link to the PDF version of the guide as well.
So, as you all know, international students bring an incredible amount of benefit to our towns and cities. International students generate significant economic net impact. In 21-22, that was estimated to be £37 billion to the UK and £2.93 billion to Yorkshire and the Humber. So it's very significant income. But also, international students contribute to our local economies directly by spending money in shops, on services, on transport and on accommodation. But they also contribute to our wider regional economy through employment while they're alongside their studies, as well as contributing to local businesses as part of their studies, perhaps through internships or volunteer programmes. International students also help to boost trade and exports, supporting growth and development in our regions. That would be when they set up companies, or perhaps inward investment when they return to their own countries. I think it's also very important to reflect that international students bring opportunities for home students. So those home students gain differently. And that's perhaps linking to some of those soft skills that we were speaking about earlier. So Yorkshire University has been very keen to highlight and share these key messages. Although the Migration Advisory Committee did not take away the graduate visa route, which is a good thing, we've already seen international students unable to bring dependents, having increases in their fees, and also yesterday the new government, well, UKVI, talked about additional requirements for agents who frequently recruit those students. So what we are already seeing across our region is that applications are 40% down. The new government is also promising to reduce net migration. So we probably will have a little less international talent, which is all the more reason to try hard to retain it. There were just under 50,000 international students in Yorkshire and the Humber in 21-22. That figure is probably lower now. But we want to ensure that our region is a place in which international students can succeed and flourish. We are the biggest importer of international students outside of London. So Yorkshire and the Humber is attractive to international students. There are already lots of initiatives, and hopefully our panel members will discuss some of those. And what's quite clear around this new government growth agenda is that graduate skills are so important. So I'd like to now introduce the panel. So we have Fatima Khan Shah from the West Yorkshire Mayoral Inclusivity Champion. Would like to join us. Barry Gray, who is Head of Student and Graduate Employability at York St John University. And Barry is also President-elect of the Association Farm. Great. So we'll come to you first, Fatima. I think there's a microphone there. So I'd like to ask each of the panel members, yeah, we've got Helen back, great, just to talk for a few minutes about employing international students, the importance of international students.
So firstly, can I just check, can you hear me at the back? Just wave at me. Great. I've never had an issue projecting my voice, but it's always helpful to check. I'm feeling quite emotional this morning, and it's got nothing to do with the events of last night, although yay. It's actually because I'm a former graduate of this institution, and I'm returning after 20 years of graduating as the West Yorkshire Inclusivity Champion and the chair of the new Race Equity Partnership. which is working towards making Sheffield an anti-racist city. Now, you're probably thinking, well, why is she telling us that? We don't care. Well, the reason why you should care is because role models matter. You can't be what you can't see. And when you're an international student who is leaving everything they've ever known, coming to a place that's really different, that support, that infrastructure, and that aspiration, visible aspiration, is crucial in creating a thriving and inclusive academic environment. So that's the first point. The second point is I work for the first ever female mayor. Now she's got more, but she was the first. And our aspiration has always been that Yorkshire is a place, irrespective of the route that you've come from, where you can fulfil your potential. And I remember when I first started working at this institution, so I studied here and I worked here, I was the person who used to go to the airport and meet those international students and bring them back and make sure they had their accommodation and took them on the tour of the Sheffield city centre. And I loved it. But what I also learned was how important that support structure was in enabling someone to do that really difficult transition of settling in to a new country, a new city, a new institution, and a new way of working. And that support really matters. I'm also proud of this institution because it recognised that someone of my heritage had worth and had potential. So one of the reflections I was going to share with the former panel was that I can't see myself in certain industries, which makes me feel that that industry is not for me. Now, the reason why that is the case is not only the lack of visibility, but because growing up in an environment where I'm different, where my socioeconomic background is different, where my faith is presented in the media in certain ways, I am conditioned to believe that I don't belong. Now, if I've grown up thinking that, a new person coming in, how would they feel? Then in addition to that, there are the non-verbals that exist within the societies and organisations of this country of sometimes it doesn't matter what you know, it's who you know. Sometimes the way in which you present yourself really matters. Sometimes you've got to keep your head below the parapet. Sometimes you've got to keep your head above the parapet. All of that is a factor to the impact of students' experiences within our institutions, but also their academic attainment and their success post-graduation. So if you are someone who is thinking of coming to this country to study, with all the barriers that our professor alluded to, why would you come? And then when you do come, and your experience is not a positive one, why would you stay? So my challenge to you all is, it isn't just about the academic attainment and the actual credibility or appointability of those individuals. It's how we as a collective are shaping the experiences of these individuals who are really talented to fulfill their potential and want to stay and want to work for us. Because we need that economic prosperity as a country, as a region. The final thing I will say is I have got the wokest job title in the country, right? I am the inclusivity champion and I own it. The reason why I own it is because a stable society is a prosperous society. And we are currently living in an environment where we have an intolerant rhetoric, a rhetoric that is against social cohesion and making others seem different and that they don't belong. And it is really important that when we are cultivating the future talent of our international students and wanting them to come and work in our organisations, and my role covers health as well, so we recruit and attract loads of international graduates to come and work within our organisations. These sentiments matter. So my call to action to all of you isn't just how do we attract people to come to this country and study in our institutions and support them in a way that is personalised to their specific needs, because not all BAME is the same people, newsflash, but also how do we cultivate that talent to make them want to stay here and thrive within our organisations, recognising that our organisations and our societies are currently unequal. So we need to work towards equity and social justice, not only to make those individuals fulfill their potential, but to make our economy the best it can be. And you've all got a role to play in that. There's loads of good practice. The recruitment guide is an exemplary way in which to make that happen. But we can't do it on our own, and I need your help. So I hope that you're with me.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Can you hand it to Barry? Okay, so over to you, Barry.
Thank you, Fatima. That's made my life slightly more difficult to follow that inspirational thing. And so I'm not going to try and follow that inspirationally, but I do want to. You might regret that. I want to talk about two things then, really. One is to just be honest. How do we cut through the bias and the protocols and the process that prevents international recruitment in the workplace and into placements and work? Because we know from ACAS internationalisation surveys that it is, in reality, far, far more difficult if you are an international student or an international graduate to get a job in the UK after you graduate or to get a work placement as you graduate. The other one I want to talk about is the sense of belonging, culture and language. And that's where I want to start. And I think it talks to the inclusive recruitment guide, is and I'll do it from both sides because I don't want to seem biased myself that I'm talking to recruiters and not talking about what we can do as universities. The language that we often use in itself is not inclusive and it doesn't create a sense of belonging. It's a bit like you said, Fatima, you can't be what you can't see. You certainly can't be something either if you're reading about a person that seems very different to you because of the language that we use. And anyone who knows me knows that I like a sort of an analogy, but I don't like a metaphor. So I'm going to talk about an analogy about a metaphor. I really, really don't like the term smashing it. Sorry, Martin, because I know that you used it earlier.
Not like everything I like.
No, it's fine.
It's allowed to disagree.
And I was listening to the radio a few weeks ago, and somebody said, my wife's at home making some IKEA furniture. She's really smashing it. I thought, well, we've all been there.
What, literally?
Yeah, well, we don't know, do we? Because and what I'm trying to do is a sense of a comedic way is if we're using those kind of language that is not really clear to us what that means, are we often using within our culture language that people don't understand and where they don't belong? So you're saying we want people to stay and we want to retain people. Are we creating the culture where they feel they want to stay and they want to be retained? I know that the West of Yorkshire Combined Authority is looking at a project around increasing the amount of graduates going into SMEs. If we're thinking it logically about international students, it's not about necessarily trying to engage them because they want to work here and they want to work for companies. It's about bringing those SMEs together to create that culture of belonging. Some of those graduates are going to be the only person that looks like them in that workforce. So we need to make sure we bring them together rather than trying to attract them in. From a university point of view, we really do need to prepare them for a different cultural workplace. In the same way as we do not send 250 psychologists into one firm, we do not see 60 Nigerian graduates leave university and go together into a firm. The UK labour market is very complex and very different. And sometimes we don't break down those sense of, oh, I've got a degree, I can go straight into a UK job. We need to help them with those kind of critical skills and that understanding of a complex labour market that doesn't care whether you've just done a degree, it cares about the things that you've done alongside in the embedded. And finally, I'll just talk about bias and process. One of the things that we're doing at York St John, and it's been talked about a lot here, is making sure organisations can meet and work with international students much earlier. You've got to create that connection. If people are going to go through what is a really difficult process because of the past government rhetoric to recruit an international student, we need to expose as universities our international talent to you as organisations earlier. So we need those kind of projects, those integrated learning, that work-based learning, project-based learning, applied learning, whatever you call it, in the curriculum so you can meet those students, see their talent, see their way of looking at something from a different cultural perspective. And as universities, we can help students to understand the realism of working with UK employers. The other thing that we probably need to do as well is remember that it's difficult for organisations to think about recruiting an international graduate when the workplace graduate visa is only for 2 years. And so we maybe need to look at what happens in Europe when we think about that second year often of a postgraduate degree, rather than as a 1 year placement, as the first year of 3 years that they can make a big difference in the region. Thanks.
Okay, over to you, Becky.
Hello everybody, it's lovely to be here. So my name's Becky Hart and I'm the Regional Director for the CBI in Yorkshire and the Humber. So prior to working at the CBI, I worked for 20 years in various manufacturing organisations in the region. And one of the things that struck me about the CBI was just how incredibly diverse an organisation it was. Frankly, I had never been in an organisation which had so much diversity of lots and lots of different types, and it was incredibly refreshing for somebody who spent her whole time working in white male dominated industries. It was brilliant. That doesn't necessarily still get reflected around the country, and one of our roles is really to try and promote the importance of international students. And from a CBI perspective, it's going to be from a UK economy. So the fact that the HEPI report that came out 2 weeks ago, was it? Probably a bit longer than that now, which broke down the importance of international students by a constituency level was really important. So Sheffield, 770,000, Yorkshire and Humber, 2.9 billion, but the UK was 41.9 billion. That's massive. To put that into context, in 2021, that's bigger than the beverage sector. It's bigger than the tobacco sector. It's huge. And I just don't think really is appreciated by many people, probably outside of the sector, but also by sometimes by the business community as well. So I think that sort of, that economic impact is huge. Secondly, is the soft power. So we've seen lots and lots recently about the regional mayors. They were in number 10, sadly without Oliver on Tuesday. But we're going to see a lot more of that collective mayoral work done now. And we've got a mayoral summit next week just to talk about that. They've got the King's speech coming out next week as well. So, and the soft power, and I was really, really struck by a story that came out in, I think it was during the sort of regulated period, about the Emperor of Japan who visited the UK. He made a special visit to Oxford because he wanted to go back to where he had been an international student. But they featured all the other people he'd sort of shared the flat with. And that, for me, was a really strong story. It sort of really resonated about how important and how they are ambassadors for the university, the college that they went to. And we actually know quite a lot about sort of who our famous alumni are from a domestic perspective. Do we know any of the international ones? I'm not actually quite sure about that. Maybe something that we need to sort of seize upon. And then thirdly, it's how then do we encourage people, and a lot has already been said about the negative rhetoric that we have seen over the last few years. UK competitiveness, one of our roles is to try and help the new government think about Brand Britain and think about how you make the UK a much more competitive place to invest. But most importantly, to not just invest the money, but then to keep it here. And obviously, international students, their skills, and all of what they bring to a sort of diverse workforce, I think is very important to that. Thank you.
I'll hand over to Sally.
Great, thank you everybody. I've got some slides which is making up for the fact that I'm full of cold, so I hope you can hear me okay. I'm Sally Allington, the founder and CEO of Ethos Farm. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my business, just so that you can position it and understand it in your head. Because while we're not a farm, we do grow Ethos. We're a customer experience consultancy, established in 2017. We actually ranked as the 12th fastest growing privately owned UK company this year in the Sunday Times 100. And we were also the 3rd fastest growing UK consultancy. We've got offices in London and New York, 1,300 employees worldwide. I personally was the Every Woman Entrepreneur Award winner last year, and I'm also an Every Woman Ambassador. So really trying to break down barriers for women in business and really empower women to go for it and lead organisations. We're Forbes Business Council thought leaders, so we write articles for Forbes on customer experience. We're a great place to work, top 100 employer, and also a top 100 for women and wellbeing. I recently featured in the Sunday Times myself, and I'm also in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year 2024 finals. Just to give you an idea of the clients that we work with, who we talk to about their customer experience, Global brands, luxury brands, aviation features heavily, retail, Leeds Bradford Yorkshire Airport is up there, just to point out. So a whole range of people, but aviation is a key one that I'm going to zone in on in a moment. How did I get involved in working with international students? Well, I got involved because back in 2018, I had a call from a former client of mine from Gatwick Airport. So I told you that airports are going to feature in what I'm talking about. And she had changed career path. She'd gone from being someone who worked in operations at Gatwick Airport to being the careers advisor at, I'm hoping this isn't a swear word, Lancaster University. And she contacted me and said, could we have a catch up? And she also wanted to talk about a challenge. Her challenge was that she was really struggling with getting work placements for her international students. Lancaster University, as many of your universities here, have high proportions of international students. And I think lots of those students going up against native British students, where for these international students, English isn't their first language, was struggling to get 3-month internships or full year placements. This to me was completely mind-boggling. I never even thought this would be a challenge because I've worked in aviation my whole life, and really my career started just post 9/11 when airports changed dramatically. Airports really moved to being private organisations, competitive organisations, gateways to our country, organisations that couldn't rely on aeronautical revenues anymore. They needed to look to retail, to food and beverage, to car parking. I knew from the work that I did that if you could get international people working in airports, speaking the language of the customers who are flying through, my God, does that have a difference? I'm going to give you a statistic. Heathrow Airport, one of my big clients, average spend per passenger at Heathrow, pre-pandemic, if you were to take all the numbers, every passenger and all the spend, you're looking at around £6 per person. Bear in mind that not everyone spends. Some people go and buy a handbag, some people just buy a coffee, so a bit of a mix. Drill down into Chinese passengers, pre-pandemic, £1,500. Now you imagine when Vicky says to me, I've got all these Chinese students and none of them can get internships. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got 100 clients who would love to work with you. So these are just some examples of things that go on in airports to really, truly destination target. Those two pictures over on the left-hand side are focused on Chinese New Year. The bar actually in World Duty Free, you probably won't realise this, but this digital branding where you've got Jack Daniels, that branding changes by hour based upon the destinations that are flying through, because you can be so targeted with your marketing. What I ended up doing for Lancaster Uni was saying, look, why don't I meet some of your students who are having challenges to get work? I'll do a first screening interview with them, understand what their skills are, what their interests are. On the other side of things, I'll tap up some of my clients and say, hey, would you be interested in a Mandarin-speaking marketing expert? My God, yes. And let me try and pair them up. And so for the trial year, which was just pre-pandemic, we ended up placing people at companies like Bacardi, Reps UK, which is a private meet and greet organisation, Blackjack Promotions, an experiential agency. And these people got work placements very easily and actually very successfully. I'm very delighted to have here Jacqueline. Here she is, who was one of our success stories from the 2019 programme we put together. She was a former placements practice student with us. She now has a permanent job at Ethos Farm as our International Customer Experience Manager, currently focusing on tailoring customer experience at Battersea Power Station for international residents. And also a preparedness for, I'm hoping, a return of shopping tourism in the UK if we ever bring back tax-free shopping, which is another campaign I could talk to you about for a very, very long time, and supporting that campaign to reverse the tax-free shopping ban. Just to summarise, really, the UK, our GDP, we are 80% services. We don't necessarily manufacture many things anymore. We don't have the biggest agriculture in terms of what we're doing for GDP. So services, people, the soft skills that everyone talked about earlier, this is fundamental, absolutely fundamental. Tourists are coming back to the UK in massive numbers. And you've got an international gateway right here. You have got, this is all the cities that Leeds Bradford Airport serves all around the world. You've also got some incredible tourist destinations. And if I just highlight somewhere like Bicester Village, who in 2018, Bicester Village is a designer outlet village who so understood the importance of having international people working in their business and going out and approaching international organisations, tourist organisations, people that arrange travel for different countries and nationalities. They became the second most visited tourist destination after Buckingham Palace. They're a shopping centre. So think what we could do if we actually really applied ourselves to thinking about all those countries around the world that want to come here, enticing them to come here, and having the people working for us who can speak their language, understand their culture. We've alluded to it before, but we are in a new era, and called it Global Britain before, call it Britain Reconnected. Think of Britain as a company. Everyone else around the world, all those other countries, are our customers. Everyone that's here, whether you're born here or not, are our employees. I'm telling you now, if we're going to win those customers, we need people here that understand those companies. So out there to everybody, please do your bit. International students, Jackie is here to answer any questions. I'm a big supporter, so yeah, that's my story.
Sally, and just finally, Helen.
Yeah, so my role at the university is career consultant, as Karen said, but my focus is on working with international students who will then become graduates. And I think in terms of retaining international graduates, it's about giving them a chance. A lot of people are put off by the fact that they're an international student and they can only work 2 years on the graduate visa. At the moment, you know, who knows, this all may change. But often if you've had a student with you for 12, 18 months, you might decide actually it's worth sponsoring that student than starting the recruitment processes again. As sort of other people on the panel have said, they can bring a different perspective. They are really interesting. We do one-to-one appointments with international students, and in that time we get a real chance to find out exactly where they've come from and the motivation for coming. They pay a lot of money to come. It's a huge investment. They can help to diversify your workforce, as you're probably aware, and they can draw on their vast experiences. We work with a lot of postgraduate international students because that's where our big numbers are. I think that's similar for other universities, and they come with a wealth of experience. So the softer skills that you've been talking about this morning, they have these skills, and they can possibly fill any skills gaps that you may have. So at the University of Bradford, myself and Anna started our roles 18 months ago, and we've become experts in international students, and we've been running a career development programme. Now, in this programme, as much as we're sharing information with students, it's an opportunity for us to learn about them as well. And we've learned that, you know, they come here to study a master's qualification. They think that that high-level qualification will secure them a job. As we know, and as people have said this morning, it doesn't matter necessarily what degree you've got, even if your degree is relevant. So we spend a lot of time helping students to draw out the softer skills and tailor those applications, which I know you'll be looking for as employers, and it's a huge thing within the careers service. So we run our career development programme. We offer exclusive appointments to international students reserved for us with myself and Anna. And we're always encouraging our international students to gain that UK work experience. You know, some employers prefer that they've got some UK work experience, and this might be in a care home, you know, it might be in hospitality, it might be in roles that don't necessarily relate to what they're studying, but as you've sort of said earlier on, they're grafting. They take in these opportunities whilst they're here to do something they've never even done before. And we help them to recognise as well the skills that, you know, the communication skills, the time management skills, etc. So, you know, in terms of employers, and the employers we probably want to speak to are not the ones confidence can bring. They can work 20 hours a week through term time, which means they can apply for summer internships that are full-time. So you might want to think about offering a summer opportunity that is 20 hours a week or less. The placements that they do as part of a postgraduate course don't necessarily sit in the normal time through the summer. They might be in, September at the end of the course. Often they're 3-month placements at the end of the course. So, whatever your recruitment needs are, contact the universities, obviously contact Bradford, but I know all the other universities in the room do similar things, so let's work with you. And just finally, I know for SMEs, time is of the essence. So, if you want to recruit and you want to work with one of the universities, we'll help you with that recruitment process. We'll advertise the vacancy for you. We'll collect the applications. We'll help you with shortlisting, but at least we'll arrange the interviews for you, set up the times. And it's difficult for you always to come into universities, so you might want to hop on a Zoom the skills are, but to come from a real life employer holds so much more value. And it doesn't mean coming to the university again. Teams, Zoom, record a short video, send it to us and let's share. And in doing that as well, you might not have opportunities at the moment, but you're raising the profile of your business. So, an employer might think, oh yeah, I heard that employer. A student might think, I heard that employer speak earlier. Let's see whether those employers have got any opportunities. So we hear what you're saying, and we just need to work together, don't we, and support each other as best we can.
Thank you very much. So over to the audience for questions.
We've had quite a bit of success with a couple of international students, but as a small business, how can we just sort of reduce the barriers to getting international students? I've got a job that landed yesterday. I need a German speaker, an Urdu speaker, an Arabic speaker. We have a lot of clients all over the world. That is my need this week. Next week, that need changes to something.
There, and speed can be difficult from a university perspective because maybe those students have got an assessment that they've got to give in. Okay, so any ideas here?
I think thinking about what other
use your mic.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thinking about what other networks that you have access to. So possibly not going to the university at all, but are there groups that possibly do similar things to you? I appreciate there's an element of competition there as well, but that you could sort of tap up and go, oh, can you just tell me, have you got any access to people? So CBI members, that's what they do all the time. They ring me up and go, I want to put in an employee ownership program. Who can I talk to rather than Googling it? And I guess you have those networks already, but if you don't, are there people here that can help provide you with them? That would be one of the things, really.
Okay.
And that's much more agile, I think.
Fatima wants to come in.
Fatima always wants to come in. She gets FOMO every time. So I think it's really simple. Networks, networks, and networks. So if we have mechanisms by which people do this. I think my challenge to the institutions is sometimes they expect people to conform to their processes. And yet we're in a 21st century post-COVID world. That ain't working anymore. New and sort of younger people, and I obviously like to consider myself in that category, don't use those same mechanisms anymore. So there needs to be an element of proactivity to create the infrastructures, but once you've set them up, the dividends will be very pacey.
Yeah, I would say that I think the university careers advisory teams could actually help international students celebrate their diversity more than trying to make them. I think there's an element of sort of Britishizing, if that's even a word, you know, make your CV look like the next person's, or, you know, obviously make it different, but it needs to speak to a British employer. The reality is, everything that our international students have is an advantage. They're here doing a degree in English. Their English is phenomenal. So there should be no embarrassment about, well, I'm not a native English speaker, or it's actually, I understand, I could teach you, I could show you how you could market your business. Oh my God, like, how do we use WeChat, and how do we use Weibo, and how, you know, I don't know, and I can't write in Mandarin. So actually all of those things are massive advantages. And I think the careers teams at universities could help international students to really go out with confidence to employers and use their uniqueness as massive, you know, differentiators for why they're the best.
Okay, a good challenge to university careers teams. Helen, you come in and then I'll bring you in.
Yeah, so I mean, different universities have different platforms for advertising the vacancies. We at Bradford use Handshake, and employers can upload their own vacancies onto that platform. And you can obviously specify what languages you want, what the requirements are of the roles. And you're taking a chance there, because students don't always read the full job application, and I'm sure you get people that send the generic applications and don't meet the requirements. But, you know, connecting with a specific person, so like myself or Anna at Bradford and at different universities, as I've said, there'll be other connections. And we can then highlight that vacancy. Would be difficult to say, well, yeah, we've got this many students that speak these languages, because you don't always know exactly what languages students can speak, depending on which country they're from. So, you know, make those connections and keep those connections open, and we'll definitely try to do our best, because it brings you success and it brings us success.
Great, thank you. So I'll bring in Jackie.
Hello. So I do agree with what Helen said and what Sally mentioned. So from my perspective, also because I'm a former student at Lancaster University, so from my journey, I feel like talk with a career team in each university. Assume that every university probably have a pretty mature, like kind of like a career team. And also how I met Sally is because my career advisor recommended me to Sally. And that's what I want to say is because I always go to visit my career advisor, and she knows which industry that I'm actually passionate about and what personality I am. So when you talk with a career advisor as an employer, probably she got like a couple of people pop up in her mind and probably help you to capture the best person like for your demand. And also maybe because she knows that person well,
Ethos Farm.
Okay.
So tell the employers what it was that attracted you.
So is it pretty simple thing actually, because when I was at Ethos Farm was actually a startup. So I got the opportunity to work with Sally directly as a kind of like a marketing assistant. And I think what attracts me back, so give you a bit background about my journey. I did my undergraduate in Lancaster, so probably Matthew knew me. And also because when I graduated, it was back in 2022 and pandemic happened. It was pretty hard for the job market. And I have to go back to China. After 2 years, I spent my kind of like gap year in Shanghai. And then I came back to St. Andrews for master study. And after my study, I was like my peers, like looking for jobs. And then I got a return offer from Sally. So what actually attracted me to come back, I think, is because Sally was very inspirational to me. Like when I got an opportunity to work with her directly, this is also linked back to the first session that we discussed, because everyone's saying that, oh, we have to cultivate the students to have a kind of like entrepreneurial skills. But my question at that time was, I think the biggest advantage for SMEs is because you're like the students got an opportunity to work with you directly, and that's how you spread out the entrepreneurial kind of like inspirations to them, and that's how we make it kind of like a sustainable relationship, like a kind of like a circle to cultivate new entrepreneurs. At that time, when I worked with Sally, I just realized like she's so inspirational to me as a women entrepreneur, and also she's very open-minded. I think probably because Sally studied Spanish when she was in university. Also, I think she studied abroad, so she was very open, like to all the kind of like culture things or kind of like behaviors I probably have because of culture barriers. I'll give you an example. It's because in China we have a kind of like nap culture. I'm not sure if you heard about this or not. So basically we got to work pretty early, around 9, but finish work around 7 or pretty late. And then we always have a nap time after we have lunch. And then there was one day I was so it was a Thursday, so yeah, because I got this kind of like nap habit from when I was in primary school. It was so hard to change, to be fair. To me, and then she was just probably going to downstairs, and she saw me was just doing this on my table. She said like, "Are you okay, Jacqueline?" I said like, "Are you feeling unwell?" I said, "I'm fine. I'm just a bit sleepy." And then I showed her my timer that I got a 15-minute sleep, like a nap, like timer. And then she didn't tell me directly at that time. She was like, you can get up and then walk, for a small walk and then get some fresh air. Maybe it will help. But I didn't get it. And then I began doing this like just sleeping gesture again. And the second time she came to me again and give me the same suggestion. And then I went out for like a walk. And then there was once we traveled back from Luton for business trip. And then Sally just like we were having a big chat like for everything, culture, and then working environment, like the differences, and then we began having this like turn to be this topic, and she said like, "Oh, actually, you're not allowed to have a bit nap like in Europe because it means that you don't have any more work to do." But for me, I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that, because for us it's a pretty casual thing. Everyone is going for a nap. Some people transition period from where I am from, and then to getting used to this new environment. And I think this is something that I really like cherish, because not every like employer gonna give you this kind of like room to become who you are. And also I think because as an international student, sometimes you do feel challenging to fit in a new environment, because there's probably for European culture pretty similar. But if you are from like East Asia, there is definitely a culture shock. But what I feel very fortunate is because the people in our office, our farmers, like our family, it's like they do respect our culture, and then I can always learn something new from them, and then they give me enough kind of like courage, and also teaching me different culture stuff. So this is what attracts me. And also I think this is sometimes when the international students are trying to stay in the UK, apart from their work experience itself, they're also looking for something that they could learn as a foreigner, or like in this different environment. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. One more question. Yep, great. The back there.
Thanks, Monica. Peter O'Brien, Executive Director at Yorkshire University. So really delighted with this conference today. Just a question to all the panel, building on, I think, just the last remarks. If you had to make one or identify one thing that would attract international students and talent to Yorkshire, what would it be?
Right, Peter, you've stolen my final question to the panel. Okay, so who would like to start?
I will. I've lost Becky. I don't know where to put it. Just a much more positive rhetoric about the country. So I think it's interesting. Like we've been sort of less than a week since the general election, but I've had so many members who've just said to me, I feel as if a weight has been lifted off my shoulder. I feel much more positive. I think collectively, actually, we need to possibly share that vision with the outside world. And really interestingly, our international director did a presentation yesterday, and he said, our European neighbours, and I was a bit surprised at this, I've looked on in envy that actually there is a majority, and actually there is this sort of, there is an element of they've hit the ground running, and I think that sort of, trying to promote a much more positive story about the country, I think is really important.
Okay, I'll come to Barry next, and then I'll move on to Helen. And then
I think it just goes back to that point of creating that culture of belonging, celebrating differences rather than feeling you're making adjustments, and really as you move into that world of recruiting more international students and graduates, celebrating that and demonstrating that. So as Fatima has said, people can go onto your website or onto your adverts or onto your social media and see the people like themselves where they'd want to work. If people belong, they stay.
thank you, Barry. Okay, Helen.
I think from a university perspective, it's being able to signpost positive graduate outcomes. At the end of a degree, this is what our students have gone on to do. Many students come to Bradford, come to the UK in general because they it is going to draw more graduates in, students in.
Great, thank you. Fatima?
So one of my biggest lessons in my career is it doesn't matter what your message is, it's the messenger. So instead of me trying to articulate why international students should come here, I want to galvanise a whole movement of international students telling other international students why they should come here and why it's fabulous, because I think that'd be far more impactful.
Great, thank you very much, Fatima. Sally?
Yeah, a very quick one. Just totally concur with that. And I think, it's about being unapologetic. This is an amazing place with the most incredible history and the most incredible future. We talked earlier at the beginning about the development that's going on, the investment, and I think, we are in this incredible new era. So this is an exciting place to be for international students. And I think the more that we just tell that story, connect communities around international people talking about that, fantastic, because it will only help the growth. Jobs create jobs, and actually there'll be someone somewhere thinking an international person taking a job here, it takes away from a British person. That's absolutely ridiculous. If they're contributing to the positive growth of a business, that will generate
very good for living comparing with like London or Lancaster or St Andrews. I do think that it has a modern stuff, and then also it has a kind of like historical things. So I think maybe for the employers, maybe starting with kind of like providing opportunity like internship opportunities or part-time opportunities to international students probably is a good starting point, because the more international students get in your company, the more opportunities they will say, okay, it's actually possible for me to stay over here. Because I think the biggest challenge for international students, because they haven't stepped for their first step out, and then they begin thinking, oh, actually as an international student it's pretty hard for me to get a job over here. So I think starting from a part-time or internship probably is a good action for them to see the opportunities to stay over here and then get a permanent job.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. Many thanks to our panel members for engaging and really thought-provoking contributions. I've certainly got quite a bit to think about from what you've been saying. So it's been a real pleasure to host this discussion, and thank you very much to the audience for their participation. And the really good news is now it's lunch. Thank you.